All right. Okay, well, welcome everyone. You know when you go into a shopping mall, if you go to a shopping mall and you want to look for a particular shop, and you don't know where it is, you go find a map, and the maps are normally at the entrances, and you look at the map and there's normally something that's highlighted. There's normally something that's flickering or highlighted. It's, you are here. Because everyone knows that before you can find out where you're going, you must know where you are. You must know where you are. It doesn't matter if you know where Woolworths is, but if you don't know where you are, you're never going to get there. And so one of the primary things that we need to try and work out, and it's a constant work, is where are we? Where are we as individuals? Where are we as a country? Where are we as a continent, as a world, as a planet? Where are we? So to help us try and locate ourselves as a nation, as a people, what I'd like to do is to go back a few thousand years and use the story of an ancient people and look at their story, and maybe through their story they will help us to locate where we are. So if we go right back to the Hebrews who lived in ancient Egypt. Now there's something very important we need to know about who are the Hebrews. The word Hebrews means crossover ones. The crossovers. Crossovers meaning that they had to keep on crossing over borders because no one wanted them. They were dispossessed people. They were marginalized people and therefore often an oppressed people. Hebrews in the ancient scriptures does not mean Jewish, doesn't mean a nation state. It means marginalized people. And so the Hebrews who were suffering under the oppression of Pharaoh in Egypt were of mixed nationality, many different nationalities, but they were oppressed. They were all being exploited. That's what they had in common. And God says, you are my chosen people. Who's the chosen people? The Hebrews. Who are the Hebrews? The crossovers. Who are the crossovers? The non-people. God chooses non-people to be God's people. The chosen are always the non-people of the world. So there's oppression, and we have this, you know the story, it's an incredible story of miraculous survival, if not miraculous birth, of Moses. Through civil disobedience of his mother and the midwives, Moses lives. Civil disobedience brings him into life. Civil disobedience against Pharaoh, against the powers that be. Even civil disobedience by Pharaoh's daughter keeps Moses alive. So sometimes even the enemy, God works beyond enemy lines. God's working in Pharaoh's household with Pharaoh's daughter. Isn't that incredible? So God works all sides to bring liberation to God's people. Who are God's people? God's chosen. Who God's chosen? Hebrews. Who are Hebrews? The marginalized, the non-people. God wants to make the non-people people. And we have this incredible story of this involved God through the courage, especially of women, who, by the way, Pharaoh ignores. He thinks his problem is going to come from men, so he wants all the male children to be killed. But meanwhile, his undoing will come through a woman. Don't mess with women. Don't mess with women. You strike the woman, you strike the rock. So, anyway, we know the story of Moses. To cut things short, finally Moses is, you can imagine, he's Hebrew of origin, but he's living all the perks of Egypt. It's a hard place to be. In his rage spills out, and he uses violence to sort out an Egyptian soldier. And what he discovers very soon is that violence is not the answer. Violence actually disempowers you. And he flees. And he spends, a long time away. 40 long years. Huh? Do you notice that everything happens in the Bible according to 40s? Could it be that it's a symbol for new birth, because a woman is pregnant for 40 weeks? And so Moses goes away for a period where he needs to conceive something new of God. Conceive and labor and birth something new. Finally, God uses him. It's quite incredible. And says, I want you to go to Pharaoh. Who's Pharaoh? His adopted grandfather. You see, you can't separate family and politics. It's very intertwined. So he goes back, and now you can imagine what he's facing. Huh? He's not just facing a political leader, he's facing Grandpa. And they have their tussle. And then we know the story. It's he was born through civil disobedience, so it's not surprising that he is going to activate civil disobedience as well. And he has the 10 rolling mass action of 10 plagues. Okay, he brings Pharaoh's regime to a standstill. It's ungovernable. All right, because when you exploit people, you also exploit the creation around you, the ecology. And finally, that comes back to haunt you, to bite you. And then what happens is, finally, they march to their freedom. And what the press said was impossible, like as if there's an ocean in front of them, it's impossible to cross. Well, what was impossible becomes possible, and then the next headline in the newspapers was, "It's a miracle. It's a miracle." And then they spend time in the wilderness. Notice that they don't go from their land of oppression to their land of promise straight away. Very important. They spend how long in the wilderness? 40 years. Again, they have to conceive. Now, conception, that moment of conception is a joyous moment. It's a moment of ecstasy and pleasure and letting go and love. But then, a few weeks later, you get morning sickness. And then you have to labor to give birth to something new. And it's tough in the wilderness. And it's not long that in the wilderness, the protest songs that they used to sing against Pharaoh, they're now singing against Moses. Where's the meat, Moses? Where's the clean water? You know, we ate better in Egypt. Things were better back then. And then, a little bit later, they send some spies in, remember, to see the promised land. About 12 of them, and they come back, and 10 of them says, "No way, we can't go in to the promised land because they are like giants and we are as to them grasshoppers." 2 of them, Caleb being one of them, says, "No, we can do it. We can actually take the promised land." But they decide to go with the 10 out of the 12, and so they spend a long time wandering. Now, if you want to read the rest of the story, you can do that. It's in the book. Let's stop there and see how that story can help us with where we are. So, South Africa. We've had Hebrews and Egyptians. Hebrews being the oppressed and the oppressor. God hears the cries of the oppressed, and through great activism and civil disobedience, God liberates the Hebrews. And the world press has only one word to describe it. It's a miracle. There wasn't a bloodbath. It's a miracle. Everyone said it was a miracle. And we had incredible leaders of the Hebrews, like not Moses, but Mandela, who also spent a long time away, isn't it? And began with employing violence to bring change, isn't that right? But realized that that wasn't the way, and then comes back with a new way. Incredible, absolutely incredible. And now here's the thing. What we learn from our context to the difference between our context and theirs is that the Hebrews here do not immigrate and start a new land. They are going to start a new land here, in the old land. So they're going to do the new land in Egypt. Guess what? They're going to do a new land with the Egyptians. So we're going to have a new flag, you know, kind of thing. We're going to have a new flag. We're going to sing a new anthem. Some of which we know, some of which we don't know. They're going to kind of mix together, and sometimes we're going to mumble the words when we're not so sure. All right? So what's incredible is that we're going to do a new South Africa here, Hebrew and Egyptian together, oppressed and oppressor together, still with memories of what you did to me. Singing a new flag, and a new anthem, etc. But here's the thing. Where our story is in common with the biblical story is that we learn from the biblical story that you do not go from your land of oppression straight to your land of promise. You spend time in the wilderness. So, this new South Africa is in actual fact wilderness. It's new insofar as it's different from the old. It's not the old apartheid South Africa. But it's new, not in that it's the land of promise yet. If this is the land of promise, then I'd rather not be here. Isn't that right? So we're in the wilderness at the moment. That's where we are. And in the wilderness, what happens in the wilderness? There are lots of shortages. Schools are overcrowded in the wilderness. Hospitals are overcrowded. Service delivery is terrible in the wilderness. Absolutely terrible. People are complaining about electricity, about clean water, about sanitation, about the legal system, about the police system, you name it. We've got a serious amount of issues in the wilderness. So, not only are we in the wilderness, but we've got Hebrew and Egyptian together over here, trying to make something absolutely new. And so resources are scarce. And what's more than that is, remember, the promised land has giants in it. Right? We can't go in because they're giants. So, let's put all those together. Hebrew and Egyptian together in one place, trying to make something new. By the way, the one place is the wilderness, where things are scarce. By the way, they're giants stalking the wilderness. What are some of the giants? Poverty and obscene wealth next to each other. So inequality. We've got HIV, still the highest number of HIV in the world. Think about it when one member of your family dies. Now times that by 3. And you suffering from the same disease that your family died. What does that do to your sanity? Plus, you're unemployed. And the likelihood of you getting a job is almost 0. If you haven't been employed by 24, the likelihood of you ever being formally employed is almost 0 at the moment. Plus, we've got racism. Plus, we've got rape upon rape upon rape upon rape upon rape. Can you see the giants? Now, any one of these giants are huge to deal with. What are we dealing with? Hebrew and Egyptian together, so we've still got trust issues. Let me ask you bluntly, what have you got when you've got a black person and a white person in a room together? You should have 2 human beings, but in this country you've got suspicion. Suspicion. We know it to be true. So we've got trust issues. We're in the wilderness. The wilderness is full of giants. That's a massive issue. Now, when Shane comes here to speak, what word is he going to have for us in this context? Because if it doesn't address this context, then what? By the way, we also live in a world that is overheating. It's overheating. It's overheating because of what we're doing to the atmosphere. We in this country are building the 3rd and 4th largest fire-driven power plants in the world as we speak. 3rd and 4th. 93% of all our power in South Africa comes from coal-fired power plants, which is the largest producer of CO2 emissions, coal, in the world. That's what we do. We're overheating. We're well above the global average for CO2 emissions. But here's the interesting thing. Eskom uses over 10,000 litres of water per second. So when you talk coal, you talk water. We're talking water in Africa. In sub-Saharan Africa, we are a water-scarce nation. What did Jesus say? Can I have a drink of water? To the Samaritan woman. And finally on the cross, I thirst. That will be the cry of more and more people in this land. I thirst. I thirst for clean water. For water to wash clothes and to wash my children. And here's the terrible thing. we live in this world that's overheating. That we live in a world where actually Shane comes from, which is going to be exciting. That is the most powerful and wealthy nation in the world, right? And they themselves are totally and utterly obsessed with security of themselves. So the world is filled with terror, and the largest terror attack in the world, the largest terror attack that took place in the world was Wall Street 2007, 2008, where some individuals just screwed over the entire economic system of the world. And so people in this land lose jobs because some people over there have got billions sitting in their bank account. And that nation will implode, because empires always implode. Empires never, explode. No one bombs a kind of... They implode. Why do they implode? We've read it through scripture. They always implode because they spend too much money on the military. So they eventually go into debt. So they're so obsessed with security that their love for security will finally kill them. So we live in a world that is absolutely desperate for good news. Now, what is the good news that we're going to have to hear in this world context? I don't know how much time it is, but I could go on. How are we doing? Any comments? Differences of opinion? What do you think? Do you think it gets things going?
Yeah.
So the question here for me is Jesus. What does Jesus do in this new South Africa? What does Jesus do? What does Jesus say in this wilderness facing giants with a world that's overheating, with Hebrews and Egyptians trying to make it up? What does Jesus say? What's the one thing that Jesus, or the two or the three things that Jesus would want to say to us?